We begin. Lauren goes first, speaking of her city, arranged north south along river, hunger, raining, exultation, in one long sentence. Midway through, Craig joins in, speaking of his city, in iambic pentameter, arranged east west, no river, white, winter, overrun by cats. Then, with Lauren and Craig still speaking, I join and speak of my city, sad, summer, green blue, arranged north south along river, blue green canoes oriented towards the celebration island like magnet needles, the lucky shopkeepers and workers dreamily trailing their hands behind in the cool clean water as, with fireworks bursting overhead, they are rowed past in orange brown cafes toward the one bastion of happiness in their disappointing lives. I speak beautifully of my city. I represent it well. Craig and Lauren also speak well, well enough. Is this we are creating for company, those three cities, upon those distant plains, while gazing out at what we have created, hands shading our eyes. And what you might not pick up from just that passage is these people are hanging on a wall.
I mean, we're only gonna get moving pictures one way.
Socialist shelf. Read good books and organize yourself. Socialist shelf. Read good books and organize yourself.
You're now listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.
Welcome to the Socialist Shelf. Welcome back. Me and Lenore are here to talk about a short story collection. We haven't done that in a minute, so exciting. And with us, we have Tom DeSicko, Tom from Anime Sickos. Tom, welcome to the pod.
Hello, Jacob and Lenore. Thank you for having me. It's an
Thank you
honor.
for coming on. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
was I was listening to your Resident Evil 4 episode recently, like this morning,
Mhm.
and completely valid, completely agree, like politics has its place, video games has its other place. So sorry to get political on you, but that's our show.
Oh man, I mean, this book is everything. It's more chillingly relevant by the day. Liberation Day is. We're gonna have a lot to get into with that,
I
but
just wish George Saunders wouldn't make it so political. I mean,
I mean,
he tried to
mm,
bring politics into fiction. I don't know what he's thinking.
I just want ethics in my short story collection. Is that too much to ask?
I mean, that's literally was what we were like rocking with when we were talking about hell is the absence of God, but that's a different episode.
mhm.
Games are the absence of woke.
But yeah, we'll talk a little more later. But Tom has a great podcast, Anime Sickos, let me tell you, it's the four pillars. Let me see if I can remember it. I know it's anime, it's gaming, it's jobs. Is there a fourth pillar that I'm
The
forgetting?
fourth pillar is posting.
Posting, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Never stop
Uh,
posting.
yeah. Me and my friend Joe, we are the sickos. Joe couldn't be here. He's still in line to vote.
That's true.
Yeah. We think Biden can pull it out still if we really vote extra hard. Um,
Shit, I just got online to vote for Bernie. My bad.
no,
Fucked
no.
it up.
Uh, but I'm a huge Saunders head. Uh, I'm so excited to talk about this book. I'm so excited to talk about Saunders. He's the best motherfucking short story writer. I don't know about the best. He's really good. Let's say
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's because when I asked what you were interested in, that this came to mind. I That was kind of the next question. What about Liberation Day? Why was this collection something that you suggested discussing?
Um, so socialist shelf. I'm thinking of what is some book that's got socialist themes. I know my man George Saunders is always there for me in such times. Liberation Day is his most recent uh, short story collection after his foray into novel writing, which is famously Lincoln in the Bardo.
Hmm.
That was pretty good, but he's a short story man to the bone. This and this is not, I wouldn't say like the best of his collections. It has a couple duds, but the ones that hit, the title story is a fucking like slam, grand slam, incredible thing, and is, I mean, talk about class consciousness and the struggle and learning that you are being exploited and I mean, it's called Liberation Day. If only we all could have such a day. Yeah, I guess that, does that answer the question more or less?
Absolutely, it answers it. Though hopefully the Liberation Day we have goes better than the one in the short story. Though we'll get to that.
Well, I think what we learn is that there's more than one Liberation Day, and you never know which one's going to be the one and which one's going to get you stuffed back in a closet and mind wiped again.
That's
Mhm,
true.
mhm.
That's true. Well, I had actually not read this collection. I've read some of the 10th of December stories before, but I was excited to read this one. I remember this book being on my list forever, not forever ago, but when it came out a couple of years
Yep.
ago. Lenore, do you have any experience with Saunders?
None in what's becoming a recurring theme here. I'm literate except for everything that we read on this show, pretty much.
Hmm. I mean, it gives you an excuse to read new things.
Yeah.
You're contributing. Well, you do know some things about George Saunders because you did some research. So,
That's
if you
true.
want to give a little bit of a bio here, we can talk context.
Hundo%. All right. So we've got a fellow Texan here in Mr. Saunders. He's born December 2nd, 1958 in Amarillo.
Okay.
But during his childhood, he moved to Chicago. He's a graduate of Oak Forest High, if there's any Chicago listeners.
It's a
Uh,
Chicago talker right here, motherfucker.
There
Yeah.
we
Yo,
go.
okay, let's go. Let's go. Did you go to Oak Forest as well?
No, I just am from Chicago.
Well, like closer and closer. Somebody in the comments is gonna have gone there. But he went on to study geophysical engineering at the Colorado School of Mines. Mr. Saunders yearned for the mines,
That's true.
and he describes his family now
Well, it was
growing up
actually, Lenore, to
as
be clear, the
what's
School
up?
of Mines, it was actually like the explosives. It was school of you got to be not a lot of graduates of that school, unfortunately.
So, like, the thing of it is, though, like, you just gotta find a brick with the number one on it, and that's where you can extrapolate, like, where the mines are.
That
Mhm.
would be a George Saunders story, is the thing.
It would be. It
Yes.
would
Just
be,
straight
yeah.
up.
Yeah, I know. You just gotta follow the numbers. Eventually, like the smiley face up top will like put on his glasses or whatever, and then you graduate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So growing up, his family was like lower middle income. From what I could tell, he lived with his aunt for a while in his early 20s, worked some odd jobs. He was a doorman in Beverly Hills. He worked in a slaughterhouse as what's called a knuckle puller, which has got something to do with dismembering cows.
He was just straight up living the jungle. That
Yeah.
The
that
jungle,
sounds like what
or
Jurgis's job was in the jungle, I think.
yeah, or like tender as the flesh. I was in a thrift store this past weekend and I finally picked up a copy of The Jungle, so I will get around to reading it at some point.
Yes, a book we've covered, but a rare Lenore absence.
Yes, yes. I was down with a bad case of almost died. Um,
I hate when that happens.
it's the
Fucking
worst. The
worst.
disease, the disease that makes you almost die.
To be
Um,
fair, it is like the jungle that is what's happening to everyone. So you were kind of living the experience of the characters while I was merely yapping about them.
Yeah.
somewhere like the top rib on my right side is ground up in somebody's like lunch meat. So sorry about that.
God damn it.
So he wasn't necessarily raised, George Saunders wasn't with the idea that you could make a living writing, but his whole life he loved to read. And he credits his getting into writing with a visit to the library, where he found a short story by a guy named Stuart Diebeck, who is also from Chicago.
Hmm.
And Saunders describes his experience as like, oh wow, you can write short stories in our specific like regional syntax. There's no quote unquote right voice to write in. If this guy can do it, why can't I? And he's off to the races. Of course, politically as well. You see the seeds of a guy who's a big fan of libraries, very aware of the responsibility that we have to each other in the building of a society. Which is funny because he also admits to being a fan of Ayn Rand early in life.
Hmm.
He called
I
him.
don't like that.
Yeah. Well, neither did he.
Ah, okay.
He called himself an objectivist in college. A follower of her like extreme kind of libertarian philosophy, but he abandoned it in fairly short order, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I was gonna say there's like I don't think Ayn Rand gels with most of what's in here, so it makes sense that he kind of moved on from that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, no, like I think his thing was that like he liked the protagonists, like he liked your John Galtz and whatnot, but like her politics are pretty much anathematic to what we stand for.
Mhm.
What actually turned him off to Rand and objectivism was in the early 80s, I read. After graduating, he goes to Sumatra to work in oil exploration, right? And he sees a bunch of old women working on a construction site, like very poor Indonesian workers spending their twilight years in absolute drudgery conditions, like for poverty wages. And he realizes, oh, Rand doesn't account for this, right?
Mhm.
Doesn't account for people working very hard and somehow not seeing success.
Well, Lenore, they weren't like the special boy.
Yeah, they
Like
didn't have the grind set. They didn't have growth plans.
yeah,
Well, eventually I imagine like the Fountainhead was translated into Bahasa Indonesia, and then that whole country was, fine.
Yeah.
yeah, famously.
Don't look it up. You just
Famously
know it's
going
true.
well.
So he bails on that. He goes back to America. He worked a desk job at a pharmaceutical company for a while. It's during this time that he starts writing professionally. He places his first short story in 1986. It's called A Lack of Order in the Floating Object Room. Later in the 80s, he goes to Syracuse for creative writing. He gets an MFA in 88. This is pretty cute, I find. He meets his wife, Paula, in the creative writing program. His words: "We got engaged in 3 weeks, a Syracuse creative writing program record that I believe still stands."
Hmm.
3
Cute.
weeks.
Wow.
You probably shouldn't break the record. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Come on. Are they still together?
Oh yeah, they're together. They got a couple of daughters. They're
It's
happily
a
married.
cute story if they stay together. You know what I mean? If it's a
Yeah.
disaster, it's not a cute story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, this is not one of the weird ones. He finds work in his original field again now in 89. He's a tech writer. He's an engineer for Radian International, which is this environmental engineering firm. And during this time, he's really getting serious about writing, right? He's actually doing it at work in bursts of like 5 or 6 seconds to not get caught.
5 or 6 seconds?
I'm curious about like y'all's experiences like doing like what is your passion but at work.
Oh man, constant. Well, not now. Now I'm unemployed, which is a great problem in my life. Can you imagine why? Anyway, but
Because nobody wants to work.
people say that like it's a bad thing. Like, yeah, like yes, I
Yeah,
don't
work fucking
want to
sucks.
work. Like, are you kidding me? But given that when I was employed, I was a sort of knowledge economy computer boy, and since 2020, I've been working at home exclusively. Pretty much all of my creative work took place during working hours because they can't know, they don't see. I don't have the job where they have a little program that watches me. So all the big high concept Anime Sickos episodes, all the scripted stuff I've done, all the essays I've written, that was all on company time. And I was so proud of myself for doing that.
Hell yeah.
4 to 6 seconds bursts, though. Have you
You
ever been
know,
there? Because I don't understand. Maybe a tweet, but even then, 4 to 6 seconds bursts are hilarious.
he just has one sentence ready to rock, and it's just like, got it, done, back to work.
That's how he wrote the one with the mind wipe where it was just like one word at a time, the period.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
I was gonna say, yeah, no, working on I when I was working in food service, when I was like delivery driving, very often when we would have slow days, I would have a notebook in the back. That's when I was doing a lot of the writing I was doing in college, which like a lot of that never saw the light of day, but a couple things did. Um, but yeah, no, like the 4 to 6 second burst is a funny thing. I think and what was he doing at the time when he was doing this writing?
He was a tech writer.
Tech writer. Okay, so that is exhausting though. If your job is to write, to also then write. In
Mm-hmm.
addition, there is like a difficulty to that. Like when I was a ghostwriter, it's like I didn't want to write shit like of
Yeah.
my own stuff. But there's a reason I'm
I,
not doing that anymore.
I will say that I didn't know about his full sort of slate of professional short story writer jobs, and hearing them, it's like, oh, this is why all the stories are like
Yes,
that. Like this is it.
he gets
They
the office environment.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Tom, there's actually a great slate of jobs to pick from in this book. If you're, he really makes them real attractive.
You can be
Yep.
a dude flapping around with demon wings, shooting arrows at
Yes.
people. Like,
Okay,
I want
that
to be
one
that
does sound
person.
kind of sick. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
So he wins his first award while he's working there, right, at Radiant in 1994 for his short story, The 400-Pound CEO. And he's at that company until about 1996. At some point, he's outed at work for writing on the clock, but it doesn't matter. His first book, Civil War Land in Bad Decline, comes out that same year to rave reviews from people like Michiko Kakutani. Thomas Pynchon loves it.
Oh yeah,
Uh, the following year, 97, he starts teaching at Syracuse. He's a professor of creative writing, and he remains there to this day. He's picked up several awards, a small bouquet of literary fellowships. Of course, he's written a novel. We mentioned 2017's Lincoln in the Bardo, roughly 50 short stories. Most of them are collected in 5 books, including today's, Liberation Day, which dropped about 3 years ago. It was a finalist for the Ray Bradbury Prize. Obama said it was one of his favorite books of that year.
Don't hold it against the book though.
he only read the one short story, the love, will love no one, none of the
Oh,
other.
dude, he probably did. Oh my God, that's so real.
They're really cooking with this one.
We were so privileged. But yeah, as we'll see, like he's very at home in the mundane and the everyday. You know, he's got a lot of office settings, corporate settings, suburban settings. You know, and he delves into like absurdities and annoyances that you just kind of navigate and ignore for the sake of preserving your peace, right? You know,
Mhm.
politically, of course, he's pretty left from what I was able to see. He's got an essay recently in the New Yorker called Five Thought Experiments Concerning the Underlying Disease, which is about Harris's election loss to Donald Trump. It's written in this kind of like charming discussion question format, and
Okay,
if not necessarily a class divide like we diagnose here, like it hints pretty strongly at a wealth divide whose authors are behind our more or less artificial political divisions, right? And this seems fairly characteristic of his writing to somebody like me who's new to it, right? He's not going to come out and say, "Well, this is my point," but he'll lead you fairly closely to it in the text.
is it a good point that he's making? Because I have not read that essay.
Yeah, nor I.
No, I think so. You know, I think it's less like can't we all just get along, and more like look, there's a very small group of people that are cultivating our media environment and telling us to focus on like litter boxes in elementary schools or whatever like insane lies being made up rather than the fact that like there's 10 people who collectively hold like trillions of dollars and they're responsible for it all.
That's true.
Yeah,
Good point.
Mm.
yeah.
I'm always saying this.
And yeah, that's Saunders. You know, he is thriving where he is. He is living the dream. And not just in the dying on the inside way. Like I've seen some interviews. He's got one with Dua Lipa of all people, actually. She's got like a
Really?
yeah, she's got like a book club like YouTube channel where he discusses like Lincoln in the Bardo and his other inspirations therefore. Yeah, really pleasant guy.
Maybe we can
Nice.
get him on. We're working on getting Dua Lipa clout. You know.
If you get George Saunders on, oh my God. I am a huge Saunders head. I read my first Saunders short story when I was a freshman in college in my creative writing 101 class. It was the story Sea Oak from his collection Pastoralia. And it was, I don't want to say it was this, the Saunders reading dieback moment because I didn't decide then and there that I was going to become a professional writer. However, it was a similarly like, oh, we can do that type of thing. Where it is about a story about a very low income family, 2 sisters and a brother. The brother is a male strip, or rather, he is a waiter at basically Hooters for men. Hooters, no, not for men. The men are the waiters, and they have thongs on, and they have big dicks. Uh,
Firemen, foremen, throughmen. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And the 2 sisters are sort of ne'er do wells, and they have their aunt Bernice, who is like the responsible one, who like she's been there for them their whole lives. Their parents are gone, we don't know why, but like she's the one who's the voice of reason. She dies tragically, and then she comes back as a living corpse, and it's like, I hate the grave. It sucks shit. I'm like, I've like all my life I never had any fucking fun. I'm gonna get laid. And I won't spoil all the stuff that happens. Also, because I haven't read it in years, so I don't know exactly what. But like, it's so goddamn funny without being stupid. Well, it is also stupid, but like, it isn't just a joke. It's funny, but it's not a joke.
It's not like
Um,
cracking jokes the whole time. It's like the thing is funny.
yes, and well, it is doing that because the reality shows that the two sisters are constantly watching are so much, they're so jokes. It's just like he wrote down like the 100 stupidest reality show titles he could think of and picked the best one. But that was like, okay, I'm a Saunders head for life. I've read all of his short story collections and Lincoln the Bardo. His first one, Civil War Land in Bad Decline, his debut, is it was the last one I read. I read them sort of in reverse order, starting from Pastoralia, because that was the one that was out most recently when I first knew about him. Civil War Land in Bad Decline, his debut, is hilarious in the context of his career, in how like unbelievably bleak it is. It's like, oh, this is from the, like I said, like, oh, those jobs, that's why all his stories are like that. Well, these were the stories that he wrote when that wasn't a memory or a formative experience, but the air he was breathing. It is like almost like unbearably cruel, not to like, I mean, yes, to the characters, but like, it's not like like anyone's happy about it. It's cruel to the characters and it's cruel to you. And the reason is because that's just how it is in this life, baby.
Yeah.
It's like unrelenting. That there are some stories in Liberation Day that are kind of sweet, even as they grapple with horrible injustices. None
Sure. I'd say
such.
pretty much all of them.
Yeah,
Honestly, pretty much all of them.
none such in Civil War Land and Bad Decline. Pastoralia, that also, Civil War Land and Bad Decline starts a lot of themes, which we're going to be seeing throughout all of his work, including in this book today. One of which is people speaking, the narrators speak in sort of like old timey, not old timey, but like outdated and sort of like sanitized slang. Like
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
saying like frigging and like bucko all the time.
Very gee whiz. Yeah.
Yeah, they say gee whiz constantly. Another thing that is started then is the theme of theme parks that sort of involve some sort of sci-fi technology and require the employees to be in character 24 hours a day, and nobody goes to them because just on their face you just read the premise and you're like, this would suck, and so nobody goes to them. But because of the corporate mandates, you can't acknowledge that it's stupid. He goes to this well so many times. Again, in this book, it is always fucking funny. Another thing he loves to do is scenarios in which, due to some outside effect, be it a drug or a signal or what have you, people are forced to speak in ways that are not their normal way. And this allows him to sort of change up his prose in the text of the story. That happens in Liberation Day very, very notably. Another thing he loves to do is have sci-fi sort of home decor purchasables that are human beings who have opted into becoming home decor due to the incredibly dire straits that they're in. That happens like 2 or 3 times in Liberation Day. He does it so many times. I've seen people be like, I think Saunders is losing the juice. He's writing the same story over and over again. I'm not one such person. I could read 100 more.
Well, sometimes things work,
Yeah.
and if you have something either new to say or another way of saying it, even within that same thing. I mean, like, hell, like, read Shakespeare. He does the same shit that works all the time. Honestly, arguably too much. Like, whatever. It is what it is. And all at the end, we're gonna remember the stuff that's good, right?
Yeah.
um,
I'll
well,
look at it.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate that context. I'm excited to get into this. It's a short story collection, so kind of similar like when we did with like Bloodchild. We're not gonna like really dig into each of them individually, though I'll give you, kind of an overview. But these short stories, it starts out with the titular story, Liberation Day, which I think kind of sets the tone in a great way. I guess I'll ask too, before we get into this. Do y'all think there is any kind of specific theme that threads through all of these that is identifiable? Is there a thread that pulls these together in a way that you think is like worth noting at the top? I have an idea that might be wrong.
Yeah, give me your thoughts. I'll see if I agree.
I think most of these, I think you can make a case that most of these have this relationship to freedom and authority. That's very interesting. And it's different types of freedom and different types of authority, whether that be like on a very small level of like breaking the routine of your life and the authority there and like subverting it, or whether it be on like a literal like rebelling against the system level. I think all of these, it's that relationship to like sort of forms of domination. I think there's some that holds up less well than others, but also I think maybe I'm like also colored by he chose Liberation Day as the titular story. The title is Liberation Day, right?
Yeah.
I think that threads everything pretty effectively, and that was kind of the framework which I'm like reading everything. I tried to do a funny thing where I like set all of these in the same universe and how they could coexist in like a Pixar theory type of way. I gave up on that,
Yeah.
but I thought it was a funny idea.
I
Um,
don't I don't know that that's particularly difficult, you know. I mean, the ghoul, right? You know, that's fairly siloed off in a way that like anything topside could be happening.
that's true.
Mhm.
That's
Um
true.
and of course, I think part of what threads these things together is the what you say about people's relationship to authority and freedom. It's a little more abstruse scaling that down to something like Mother's Day, right, which is about like interpersonal relationships and whatnot. But you can have a you can have a structure that renders one basically like an AI slash wage slave, as in Liberation Day, right? And you
Mhm.
can also have a set of relationships and grudges and interpersonal like sins that trap somebody in something that only a heart attack can free them from. You know,
Mhm.
like there's bits and pieces where you're either shaken out of that paradigm, or where it's you and one other person trapped in it, or not necessarily trapped, but existing in it together, as in Sparrow, right? A relationship
Mhm.
between two people that only makes sense to the people that are in it.
Mhm.
Sure. I think too, like it's worth, okay, so framing Liberation Day itself, I want to read just kind of how it starts. Again, this is how the book starts, and it is also how the short story starts. It is the third day of interim, a rather long interim for us. All day we wonder, when will Mr. U return? To podium. Are the Untermeyers, Mr. U, Mrs. U, adult son Mike, pleased? If so, why? If not, why not? When next will we be asked to speak? Of what? In what flavor? We wonder avidly, though not aloud, for there may be penalty. One may be unpinioned before the eyes of the upset others and brought to a rather penalty area. Here, the Untermeyer's shed in the yard. In penalty, one sits in the dark among shovels. One may talk, but cannot speak. How could one? To enjoy the particular exhilaration of speaking, one must be pinioned to the speaking wall. Otherwise, one speaks like this, as I am speaking to you now. Plain, uninspired, nothing of beauty about it. And he loves to do the thing of like capitalizing certain words to make them serious. Podium, speak, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not just to make them serious. It's because those are corporate lingo. That's like the
Sure.
the those are the what do you call it? Like the trademark terms for the product of the speaking wall, which Mr. Yu has purchased. I have actually written down, I think, all of the capitalized vocab words. Do you want me to read them?
Do it, yes.
Yeah.
Company, obviously, company being the audience when company's over. Dining, melange, speak, obviously, pinioned, penalty, pulse, interim, speaking while, beauty, specificity, rehearse, work, topic, listeners, roam star, required interposed stretching, Fahey cup, performance, proffering plate, reaching rod, knowledge mod, and Morley procedure.
Hmm. So
I
it's
love
the
the
things
proffering
this,
plate.
yeah, it's the things this guy is like attaching that to. And to be clear, this guy is a what you talked about earlier, a piece of human furniture. He and a couple others are strapped to a wall and hooked up to cables, and they have an owner, Mr. Untermeyer, who, when he puts in different things, it's commands for them to speak about certain things, and they get this flow of energy into them, and then they must speak about it. And he's basically using this as a form of artistic expression, and it as is as weird as it sounds.
Are y'all familiar with InferKit?
No.
No.
It was one of those like large language like generators. It's down now, I believe, but like my friends and I used to play with it, right? You would feed it a prompt and it would like spit out like a a paragraph or something. Like, oh, like tell me a story about Chungulus the Throng Sploder fighting Throngulus the Chung Sploder, and it would like, and it had like quote unquote like heat setting as well, where you could expand the pool of like vocabulary it could draw on, so you could like tweak it and to get something more or less crazy, you know.
Hmm.
And this
Lenore, is
is
this you coming out in favor of generative AI?
no, no, this is me
I'm
coming
kidding.
out in favor of humans like strapped to a wall and
Yes.
speaking that because what's better than, the story of Chungulus the Throng Sploder? What's better? Obviously somebody doing the voices.
I really do wonder, though. I don't think that ChatGPT was like out when this story came out. Uh, and wowee, it's just that. Like, it is just that Mr. Yu bought a chat GPT made of people that he can put on the wall, and he invites people over to watch him put in prompts. It
Mhm.
is
It's
horrible.
insufferable. It's and it's interesting because I thought of that exactly too, right? Because ChatGPT was about a year out from like public release when this dropped. Not even. And I think that's fascinating about that too is, in this case, it is made of people, as in the people are visible, but like it's hard not to think about the like actual generative AI, which is typically, just based on the labor of tens of thousands of people paid, pennies an hour in the global south. And it's
Mhm.
like it is also still this large language model producing stuff that is just drawn out of people that are uh put in that situation by economic hardship.
Mhm.
But of course, in this, you have a very literal sense that's like almost, I mean, I was going to say almost fetishistic, but like the wife, Mrs. U, comes in and like gets herself off to one of these guys and has him read her erotica essentially.
Mhm.
So like it is like a fetish thing at the same time. It is this weird, and like, we're forced to picture like literally a sponge being held up to these people with like water on it, like
Yeah.
Jesus on the cross,
On the reaching
practically.
rod.
It's it's fucking weird and
Hmm.
unsettling, and it gets you instantly. I love it.
And again, you're reminded at every turn, like it's not obscured that these are human beings. Like the wife, Mrs. Untermeyer will come in and will use I believe his name is Ted, the narrator
No,
as
Jeremy's the narrator.
Jeremy, yes. She'll use him to get herself off, and he's like, yeah, like she could get me off, but like she doesn't, and it's probably for the best, right? So
So sad.
he's just, in addition to being, let's not mince words about it, sexually assaulted by this person, like he's just constantly bricked up.
I also, before we go a little more into that, do y'all know the actual the most famous Untermeyer? Because that's a very specific name. There's Untermeyer Park in New York. But Samuel Untermeyer is the first lawyer to ever get $1 million on a single case.
Hmm.
And it's like the
Hmm.
only famous Untermeyer. Like I look, it's such a specific name, and this park is not far from Syracuse. So I like it. There's something interesting there. I don't know if it's like supposed to be that. I don't think it's supposed to be, you know, Samuel Untermeyer, but he was like an early like advocate of things of like the American stock market and things like that. So
Hmm.
there's like something floating around in there too. It's kind of an interesting like thing in the mix.
I mean, yeah, I don't know enough about the guy to say like, oh, I see the connection, but like,
Yeah, no, it just
yeah,
something's
interesting.
there and it's kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
odd. But the speakers are pinioned. They have the names like Craig and Lauren, but they're pinioned to the wall at the beginning in an X shape. Um and yeah, they're fed by sponges on a stick, and they're used like that. And Jeremy, the speaker, is obsessed with his work. It gives him his purpose in life. It is exciting to him. You hear this at the beginning. He's like, I don't want to just talk. I want to speak. Capital S. It is like an artistic expression to him. And he is actually in competition to be good at this. He says, quote, Lauren and Craig feel that I am strange, too sensitive. I fall under the sway of the settings. It is true, with greater alacrity than they always have. Well, I love my work. I aspire to always be feeling more, thus speaking with more gusto. It's obviously, he's fallen in love with his exploitation, but there
Mhm.
is just this level of specificity to it that's interesting,
Yeah.
which
I
is
want I'd like
always
to read another excerpt that I've written down
yeah,
on this same topic.
Hmm.
This is when he is sort of admitting that like I want to it'd be cool if I could fuck Mrs. U.
yeah,
Um I want further conquest with her more than I want what I previously always wanted most, i.e., to be so good at what I do that none may find fault with me, and everyone is super pleased with me, and everyone agrees that I have no real competitors in my field. I mean, not the part about Mrs. U, but that last part. Oh my god, that's me.
yeah.
I feel that.
He's on this wall and he wants to be the best guy on the wall.
Yeah.
And this Mr. U is putting on shows with them that, like, the way Tom described it is exactly right. It's like if there's some guy in your life that was so influential that you felt you had to come watch him enter chat GPT prompts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who these people are that are coming to his shows, in quotes, but like presumably his employees or something.
Yeah.
Like
Company.
it's dire.
Hmm.
I was going to say there is I took a picture of this part. There is an indication of who company is. This
Mm.
at one point company is in danger. That is the context here. Uh, Company possesses superior numbers, is imbued with the confidence of wealth, is not inclined to lose, having decided long ago to cushion itself with abundance and thus keep loss at bay. So we know who company is.
They certainly got money,
Yeah.
yes. But Mr. U is influential enough on them in some way that they come and see his shows.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the main show that this features is this story of Custer's last stand, which is
Mm-hmm.
such a weird specific choice. For those who don't know, you've got historically General Custer, you've got the legend of his last stand, basically. What the truth is, he's a imperialist invading the West, and they murdered a lot of Native Americans, and then they got what was coming to them essentially. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
He
what
got his
happened. It was
ass.
brutal. Of course, it was a brutal, horrible situation. But yeah, like he ended up dying, and they mythologized him. Still to this day, to a weird amount, like Night of the Museum 2, he like features as a central character. Like it's weird that
What?
he's still like even in modern day like gets this kind of like love, but it's Custer's Last Stand as the story that is being told by these three people that are on the wall, and then a bunch of singers that get brought in who are in a similar thing to create this like grand narrative.
Mm-hmm.
There's something. Well, why do y'all think this specific story? Obviously, there's like exploitation going on in the story, but why this? Why this moment? Any thoughts on
It's
that?
it's weird, right? Because it's they're trained to give the story in they can be trained to give the story in specific contexts and from specific readings and perspectives. There's a bit toward the end of the story, if I recall correctly, where they're giving it from the more like Native American sympathetic perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's ever denied or glossed over that Custer got what was coming to him in the text.
Mm,
And it's interesting to me, right? Because it's not the use case of, okay, I'm just going to make this large language model say ridiculous things and see what happens, right? It's going back over a very dark period in American history, and to my mind, there is that thing of, okay, like we make a war movie about how sad our soldiers are who 60 years ago went over and laid waste to this other country, right? It's a story out of history um, without necessarily a connection to or lesson for what's going on today.
I think it also is to an extent, it's like, remember this more barbaric time, and now we are enlightened and can look back upon it.
Hmm.
But you
Hmm.
have human puppets
Yes, and
that you
there
wipe
is
their brains saying it.
there's a great bit where Mr. Yu is sort of like explaining how he wants this to go in when they're rehearsing with the capital R. And he's like, I want company to know that Custer's Last Stand happens to real people, not abstractions. And I wrote that down and then wrote Lol Lamau after it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, part of it is I think because he does choose to have like there be main characters who are Native Americans who are trying to live their life, and these insane murderers just show up for no fucking reason and start killing them. And like when it becomes clear that they are incompetent and are about to be slaughtered, there is like we did it, like yeah. And there's I think part of it is, I mean, I hate to use the language of the enemy, but like virtue signaling. Like, look, guys, I may be rich, but like I understand that like you said, like we used to be so much more barbaric. Not so now, because they always talk about how well they treat the people on the wall. The people on the wall are being
Yeah.
paid. Let's be clear.
Mhm.
There's a bit where Jean, the maid, we have a flashback to when they were first pinioned, and it was basically the day they were born in terms of their cognition, because they don't have any memory before they were pinioned. That's part of the terms. And Jean, the maid, is telling them as she is giving them little treats, like, "Oh, it's must be so nice of you to not remember your mothers." And she starts crying, and it feels so bad that she gives them more treats than they're supposed to get. And all three of them look at each other as if to say, "This place rules."
Yeah.
Uh, that yeah, just yeah, and also it's a scene of, well, an oppressed minority triumphing over an unambiguously evil and stupid oppressor, and a moment of joy, a liberation day, if you will, uh, that is colored, of course, with the knowledge that ultimately completely meaningless.
Right. Right.
The
Ultimately,
white
the
people win.
tide is coming.
Yeah, and they even know that. They even talk about that in the singing, or in the speaking, I should say.
Yes. And then we have adult son Mike, who is going to bring in basically like a gang of like animal liberation front people, but like, for these humans, like just this like group of like radicals he met in college who were like, fuck it, we're gonna free these people. What do we think of adult son Mike? Because it's not, obviously from the speaker's perspective, it's like, oh, it's this shitty guy who doesn't agree with the fact that we're up here. But I think it's interesting that adult son Mike is also like, used to be like really into changing their clothes until he had to do work, and like clearly is kind of spoiled and isn't down with it so much that he's willing to like actually use real force to, he's kind of like I don't know. What do y'all think of Mike?
There's a naivete about him, right? Because I mean, even from the perspective of somebody who is totally on board with his own subjugation, right? Um, the Jeremy's assessment of him is thus: he has no work, no art, no dreams, no joy. He just has anger and a fondness for being correct in his energetic, self-righteous disapproval of all that he sees.
Yep.
Which, yeah, which
Same.
there he can be forgiven for a little bit of self-righteous disapproval of somebody being reduced to a meat puppet AI, but
Mhm.
you also get a sense that that's not necessarily incorrect, because like he brings armed revolutionaries like into the home to hold company hostage without the sense that things might get bloody.
Hmm.
Like there is very much of the statement about what he's doing. There is very much of the propaganda of the deed without really committing to the bit.
And it goes poorly. You know,
It sure does.
the gun gets taken. The revolutionaries or whatever they call themselves defeated.
Yep.
Um, and Jeremy does it out of love for Mrs. Yu. And she ultimately still sees him as an object, and it actually brings her back together with Mr. Yu. So, at this ending is Jeremy kind of as this beloved, he did a great job, good job, but he now sees his place in this system.
And also, we shouldn't overlook that part of what the revolutionaries do before Jeremy wrests the gun from their hands. I think he's partly still in the speaking
Yeah.
thrall, like he thinks he's at war. But it's a little of both. But before that, the revolutionaries tell he tells Lauren and Craig who they were before,
Yes.
and they're just like, and they remember and go nuts, and
Right.
they're like, "Fuck you, fuck yeah," and are like taken away for to be fixed. They don't get to Jeremy. They oh gosh, I have this written down. I'm just gonna read it out loud. Um, they tell him very vaguely, like, do you even know if you have wife and kids? I engage my mind with the fiercest, most honest focus, and I find nothing. No, I say, no wife, no kids, and I think I would remember that. You wouldn't, he said. You absolutely would not, and that's the worst thing these bastards have done to you. So he doesn't. He like gets up to the point where he knows that like probably I could get pushed over the edge and end up like them, but I didn't. Which at the time he's like, thank God I can keep speaking, but obviously is no, this is his liberation day. It does not continue thus.
Well, he wouldn't remember it, and yet, like, Lauren and Crag do get jarred back to their memory of who they were, right? And that's what intrigues me in particular, because, like, you get the sense that this is a society. We don't know if it's, your more or less repressive bourgeois American democracy or like a fascist society where that sort of thing is just completely crushed. Um, you get the sense that this is a sort of authoritarianism that is not good at what it does.
Mm-hmm.
That is, that they have a
Imperfect at the least.
yeah, they have a process that is very fallible, and sometimes you just have to bring somebody in and get them like mind scraped again.
Mm-hmm.
I think too is one thing about it being the Liberation Day, even though he is not liberated, is this is the day he could have been, right? Like there's only so many chances you're gonna get. There's only gonna be the moment where, let's say, the conditions are right. And he squanders it. He actively works against it. And him at the end probably wishes he had done differently, but this was the moment. This was the Liberation Day, and he acted against that liberation, right? And I think
Well,
that's also critical.
yeah, but at the same time, I read the liberation as, I mean, he is still pinioned and he is still a speaker and he's still owned. But at the end of the story, the liberation is Mr. Yu is my enemy. Like he knows it. And like he took such great pride in his work before, because for as much as it is AI, like he takes pains to explain, like it is also us. Like
Yeah,
we are putting art into it. Like we are doing it. We're not robots. Like we have to think it up. Our brains are getting a little boost from the pulse, but we are still the ones who talk. And I loved like I George Saunders on the wall love writing my short stories. At the end he's like, I will, like, Mr. Yu is my enemy and I will never enjoy speaking for him again. So even if it is just in his mind, that he is liberated in that way, which
Mhm.
a
yeah,
tragic ending, but it's like there's still something. He knows that you know he has more in common with the Native Americans than Custer.
sure. The last paragraph is for whatever Mr. Yu may in the future give me to speak, I will never enjoy it again any more than would a puppet picked up off the floor enjoy the suddenly manipulating hand. Um, I mean, no doubt it's bleak. I guess you are right that his mind is liberated in a certain way. I wonder in the context of the story, and again, we don't have to worry about the world, right? Because the world for this exists just for the story. How much it matters, though, right? Like, because he did have this moment that was like an actionable moment, and I do wonder. We could come up with whatever the sequel. That's not what we're here to do, but like. I do wonder, yeah, I do wonder how much, like, I guess, is the Liberation Day the liberation of the mind, or is the Liberation Day the thing he could have had that he didn't have? Or is it the victory of the Native Americans over Custer? Is it yeah, we got our victory, but like, okay, we're still trapped. I don't know. I don't think I have a hard answer for that, but it's kind of a thing that's bouncing around in my skull right now.
I mean,
I
just from
mean,
my experience of other Saunders short stories, I feel like if he had escaped, if he had like been like, yes, yes, Liberation Front, I'm with you. Um, just I if I am guessing how Saunders would imagine the rest of that going, it would be a very mundane. Like he immediately like, well, your contract says you are on the wall for another year, so like, unless they have, and it really doesn't seem like they do, a big infrastructure of like hiding these people, it's not taking, and he will have it. He will have his mind wiped, and it will be as though it never happened. So like he's in the sense that like, okay, we're not going to get liberated. Like we're like, I mean, I'd love to be wrong, but it really feels like the total destruction of capital is very very far away. Uh, and so the ability to understand who your enemies are is something that is intentionally made very hard,
Sure.
and a lot of people refuse to do it even when they have the tools to. And I mean, as much as it doesn't help me to know who my enemies are, I really 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 am glad I do.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
why I'm thinking like the Liberation Day is that he develops class consciousness. He realizes who he is in society, and that they had been lying to him all along.
mhm. Yeah, no, like it's the day could be any one of those things, him getting like freed from his drudgery, or him developing class consciousness. Like there's any number of liberation days that the mind scrape can't necessarily reach, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it's the fundamental untenability of a harder and harder core fascism.
Well, Elliot Spencer essentially does kind of this in a different
Oh
way.
yeah, that's true.
But to move through this, do you any of y'all have some like, and not that we can't hop back if we have them, but some last thoughts on Liberation Day?
It's just so fucking good. Like it's
It is
so
good.
funny. There are so many lines that I've written down in my notes just because they're very funny.
Well, read a couple.
Um, Mr. U too knows that we are killing it. That's when he's jamming at the beginning, and he's like, I truly feel as though I'm killing it. Mr. U too knows that I'm killing it. At one point, someone, what I think one of the Liberation Front people is like getting in his face and asking him like, aren't you like, don't you understand? But and Jeremy's response is, "What a dummy! I am not even on." And on is with a capital O. Oh God, it's so good. I love it.
It's interesting to me that Jeremy, our meet AI narrator, plays the part of Lieutenant Henry Harrington in the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and this is a real person
Mm-hmm.
from history. And I looked this guy up. There's a bit here where he's playing out his last moments, right? Two braves broke away from the fight to chase him down. I will speak, I will shout. But his mount was superior, and soon he had left the pursuing braves behind. Then, even as they abandoned the chase and slowed their horses to a walk, Harrington inexplicably brought his revolver to his head and, "Hello, hello," adult son Mike calls from the doorway of listening room. And, Mike intervenes in this moment right before Jeremy can make this statement. Take this liberty, in fact, because I looked this up. Like, Harrington's body was never found, right?
Mm-hmm.
Historically, we do not know what happened to this guy. But as Jeremy goes on to say, he's portraying somebody who has realized his sins and says, "There is but one way out, it seems to me, as I ride, to die at my own hand, thus retaining my honor," right? Or maybe not realize his sins, right? But realize that, yeah, I have corralled myself into this area where I have to take myself out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the moment where he can make a genuinely like thought-provoking statement, right? The liberation people come in and it ends up derailing that. Um, I don't know what we're supposed to make of that, because on the one hand, like this critique seems to be like wholly subsumed into the spectacle here, but it's interesting that these two forces are at war.
The next short story in this is and that's definitely the one I think that we have the most It's the longest one, etc. Mom of bold action. I thought this was good. I don't have a lot written down. I just have like possibly fascist mom written
Oh,
down.
Yeah.
100% fascist mom.
Uh, and it's just the story of a mother who's is very, very anxious, and she writes and is constantly coming up with little stories and little realities, and her child gets pushed by a homeless man, and she basically just wants scorched earth retribution on a massive, massive, massive scale.
Hmm.
Thoughts on this one, because this one is I've got less thoughts on. I think it's good, but I don't feel as moved.
My thoughts is the key couplet for the entire thing is in the end, near the very end, she is regretting her extremely fascist reaction to uh what is essentially a non-issue. Her son is fine.
Yeah,
Uh
not a big deal.
and she is doing the classic liberal thing, which is she's absolving herself by imagining apology.
Yeah.
And she's communicating with this man who, but through her actions, his life is made appreciably worse in a way her son's was not. And she's communicating with him through an imaginary beam. And here is the key: "You are trapped in you," the beam said. "Yeah, well, who isn't?" she thought. There, that's the whole. That's all of it. It's that right there.
Yeah, or she's like, are you perfect? She's the interiority of this is very interesting because she's comparing this guy to her dead brother, and like all this shit is going on in her head. One thing that I think all of these stories do well, and everything I've read by Saunders, is there's like a level of like empathy for the speaker that is very interesting. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if the speaker is a piece of shit or just not a sympathetic person, there is this sort of like understanding of why they are the way they are, and a specificity of the character. This woman that's making up little things, and she's anxious, and she has this basis for why she is this way. But yeah, ultimately, it's her thought process is because of her precious child, and because she lives in the suburbs, and because she has done everything right, right? Because she thinks about all the right choices she has.
Hmm.
It is ultimately absolvable that, she gets this dude's, knee busted in, and could very well have gotten things even worse by like this encounter with the police and like trying to push her son to accuse a guy she's not even sure did a crime.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much that moment, those things that interplay. It is what what's it made me think of there's like a tweet from 2020, a tweet exchange where someone's saying just some crazy is a woman saying some crazy shit, and somebody says that's racist, and she says, "How am I racist? This is literally my dog." And it's a picture of a dog with like a BLM, like a little BLM onesie on, and it is like really cute, but it's
Yep.
like, how could I be racist? This is literally my dog. And that
God.
was like, that's this woman. That's
Yep.
what we've got going on here.
That
Hmm.
she is trapped in her, and yeah, well, who isn't? Again, the fact that she has the presence of mind to imagine, like her imagination came up with "you are trapped in you." She knows it, but she's just like, yeah, well, I don't care. Like so. And like, no, that's it. That's why the median voter is like that.
Hmm.
I have a note here that's like being petty bourgeois is being trapped in the bargaining stage, right? Like
Yes.
she's just constantly she can't move past this thing she's run afoul of. Like to be clear, like I don't know that we ever see like the actual person who like pushed the kid down. Like they seem to settle on this one person who like their cousins or their siblings of the owner of this like electronics store, right? They
Mm-hmm.
settle on this like one person who's like who they decide is the culprit, right? The husband goes, it's insane to me, right? The sort of escalation of this stuff, right? Um, there's so much supposition, there's so much assumption that they arrogate to themselves the right to act on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could tell from his face he had a mean streak, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
the one who hadn't done it, well, if in the future he ever considered something out of line, which he probably would, given the life he was leading, he'd think twice. Net result, a safer Church Street. This is somebody who's related to the guy that her husband like beats with a bat,
Yeah,
right?
because there's like two like identical brothers basically. So the kid's like, I think it was that guy, and they're like,
Yeah.
God, and then like we found another guy who's the same, and he doesn't know.
I think the kid had bad vibes in the first place. I would like to hear the old man side of the story
Yeah.
because like this kid could have been, you know how the kids are these days. He could have been trying to show him a talk talk. He could have been
Yeah.
Talk talk.
whatever, one of those things. Lenore, you're more in touch with what the kids are up to these days.
Yeah. Do they like talk talks?
They like the talk talks, I think.
The Tok Toks, the Tuk Tuks, they're all into like small like Vespas or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Um, but but it really I was talking to you, Jacob, the other day about this. Like this story, maybe more than any other in the book, made my blood boil because it captures so hard I remember this being described in fucking like Dungeons and Dragons, right? What lawful evil is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like not only evil that is allowed to exist like within the confines of the law, right? There's a certain class of people that's allowed to visit violence on another class and get away more or less scot-free. Frequently successful is how lawful evil is described. And so it taps into not only that, but the mindset that leads one to feel deserving of this violence that they perform, right?
Mhm.
Church Street did not belong to them or Derek. It belongs to those two freaks who, because freaky, were somehow the most powerful players in the whole idiotic deal. Why were rejects running the show? Seriously, it was all backward because nobody wanted to hurt anybody's feelings. Nobody was willing to say what they really thought. Nobody cared enough to take a stand for what was right. And it's that classic fascist imagery, right? Of
Mhm.
these people who are down on their luck, who are, this homeless person who pushed this guy over. This person who's at like the bottom of society is suddenly has access to this special treatment, right? Is suddenly like invincible, is suddenly powerful, right? And must be put down.
Mhm.
My son has a boo-boo because of woke.
Yeah.
That's
Literally, no, like there's a bit like what spurs the narrator's husband to action, right? To beat this guy with a bat because he was there, right? And because an example needs to be made of him, right? What spurs him to action is this story that the mom writes, because that's the conceit of it, right? She starts out like with writer's block, and then like once this thing happens to her son, she sits down and she writes out this like essentially like fascist NIMBY like fantasy. And she's like, oh, I was in the wrong genre the whole time. And for her, the right genre is right-wing grift.
Mhm.
so true.
I also love that the sort of like turn at the end because of course she reads it later and she's like, "What? How could I say such evil things?" Oh gosh, her like turn where like her thing at her like liberation day, like now I'm different is like I will do good, and the good thing I will do is I will never burden my noble husband with the knowledge that the man limps now because of him, and he'll never
No.
have to suffer knowing that. Um,
Yeah, no, 100%.
And then she founded Moms for Liberty,
yeah.
presumably.
Speaking, I just want to read this bit because you talked about how the two freaks, because freaky are the most powerful players. They are related to the guy who owns the electronics store, and she learns that. And I love this. This is again just like the liberal mind. She should march in, identify herself as a good customer who, over the years, had spent literally thousands of dollars in there, demand that he do something about his low life nephews. Well, it hadn't literally been thousands, just that one TV on clearance. So like $300. Point was, she was a customer. And it's just like,
God.
that's that.
No, yeah, anybody who's worked retail has seen this person, right, who has arrogated to themselves, this thing based on like their position in the whole consumption like hierarchy. It's also like this is pretty blink and you'll miss it, but like she's writing her little screed, right? This was the real shit. Wow, she knew just what to say. It was like walking across a creek and rocks kept appearing beneath her feet. It was like speaking out loud, but on paper. It was the most honest, original thing she'd ever written. Didn't sound like her, and yet it was her, for real. Bang. Yes. Perfect. And right, like I don't know if Saunders is deliberately referring to this. Like the phrase that I have in mind is like the Chinese saying, right, crossing the river by touching the stones. Like it's the perfect inversion of that, right? Walking across a creek and rocks keep appearing beneath your feet, right? You know,
Hmm.
there's no analysis, there's no like careful observation and exploration, right? There's just vibes and following vibes and letting them lead you to this like Mrs. Rittenhouse like bullshit.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I think we probably need to move on just so we don't take forever.
We need to
Correct.
cross a river.
Yeah, we
Yes.
need to cross the river here. The next one, love letter sucks. I'm
It
sorry.
sucks. The goat is washed. Sorry.
This
It's
one's
so
bad.
bad. Uh,
Lenore, I know I don't know. I know you felt slightly differently than I do about this one, but
So
like, okay, so you want to explain the central conceit? What's going on here?
yeah, like basically like Trump Reich has happened, right? Trump is not president
Don
anymore. His
Jr.
son
becomes
is.
president.
Yeah,
yeah.
Don
We
Jr.
are all triggered.
Do
We've
we think
all been
it's
triggered.
do we think it's Don Jr. or do we think it's Eric?
It could be Barron. It
Oh,
could
it's
be
definitely
Barron.
Baron. It's
He's like
100%
20
Baron.
feet tall at this point. He keeps getting bigger.
6'20" weighs a fucking ton.
Hmm.
Um, No, but yeah, so like it's a grandfather writing to his, I believe, like granddaughter who's like growing up in this new American fascism, right? Well, not growing up, but like who is an adult in this new American fascism and is like, yeah, like we could never have seen this coming and like we were so privileged to have what we had before and now our democracy is gone, right? Um it's not hard to suss out that this is fan fiction about Trump, right? Because there's stuff about like, oh, it was his third term and then the son, right? It's in the 2020s, so like the era is there, right? And if you track down like the interview that he gives about this story, Saunders is straight up like, yeah, it was the 2020 election. I was in a weirdly patriotic mood and like, wow, I'm taking all this for granted, right? Um, and that to me is more what it's about, not about Trump specifically, but like realizing that the world has left you behind, right? And the sort of thinking that engenders such a thing happening, right? The text doesn't really delve into how like repressive bourgeois American democracy can be without needing to resort to outright fascism, but like that sort of thinking is real, right? How like I've completely missed this process and now like my opportunity to participate in it I perceive to be gone, right?
It's weird though, right? Because like all his other stories are showing how fucking bad it is now,
Yeah.
right? Like, and he has this quote in here, where this guy says, "We were not prepared to drop everything in defense of a system that was to us like oxygen, used constantly, never noted. We were spoiled, I think I'm trying to say, and as were those on the other side, willing to tear it all down because they had been so thoroughly nourished by the vacuous plenty in which we all lived, a bountiful condition that allowed people to thrive and opine and swagger around like kings and queens while remaining ignorant of their own history." And like, yeah, there is some criticism in there, but it is like interesting. Like, it really like I don't know. Like, and I understand this is from this character's perspective, but it is frustrating to me given like the other stuff being like about the exploitation that we are actively, or people at least, are actively experiencing. I don't know. What do you think, Tom?
I think that the goat is washed. I think this story sucks, and here's why. We have talked about this show and I on Anime Sickos, and it seems paradoxical until you think about it for a second, and it's not. Art, if you want to make art about a political moment, you make art about what being in that moment is like.
Mm.
Hmm.
And that's what Mama Bold Action and Liberation Day, they are much more on point. They have a much stronger point and much more deep insight into living in fascism and Trump America than the story about Trump. And I'll tell you why. When you actually just make it about something that everyone knows, like the space in which you have to play as an artist is like so much shorter because like so much of what you can do in the story has already been determined
Yeah.
by how it is in real life. And so already it feels very constrained for a Saunders story and very like his trademark originality is just like not there because it's like, yeah, I know about this. I lived it too. And also, and this is just the killer thing about Trump is that there is no subtext to him at all. There is no hidden depth that you do not immediately into it upon seeing him speak for a second. So like to be like, oh, I will like delve deep into what this means. It's like, no, there's no depth. There's no, so half your story is a thing that has no depth. So just like, it doesn't matter how good the rest of it is. Just the fact that like I'm gonna write my Trump story is like, oh no, buddy, you've been writing nothing but Trump stories. You don't have to make a bad one where half the work is done already for you and it's done crappily because it was done by an evil man living a shallow life. That's
Yeah.
what I think.
I'm inclined to agree. I appreciate the specificity of doing the puzzles. That's a little bit of like I see that's what works in the other stories. But yeah, I think that, and then it's like and I just also think it just gets, it feels like Lenore said that he said he was in a patriotic mood when he wrote it. It feels weirdly patriotic for this guy that is. I'm just kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? But
Yeah.
Lenore, I do understand that you like some of the like language and some of
Oh
the-
yeah, no, I mean it's a real type of person from whose perspective this is written, right? I can't help but think of my grandmother, right? She frequently says, yeah, my generation screwed things up, and I'm sorry for the world that I'm leaving you. That sort of despair, um, that sort of despair exists, but I agree, like, the Trump stuff, like, specifically, like, it dates this thing like a goddamn calendar.
Mhm.
Lenore, I think we can all agree that it is your grandmother's fault in particular.
Yeah.
It's
She should
just,
have fought harder.
yeah, she did this. TBH. No, no,
Mhm.
no. Lenore's grandma. No, not on you. This one's
Hmm.
not on you. Um,
The darkness sweeping the world came out of Wyoming and nobody knew.
Honestly, now that you're saying it, that does sound like the start of a more interesting short story than this one.
I love you, Grandma.
Yes, shout out to Lenore's grandma. Come on the pod or don't. I have no idea. I've never met Lenore's grandma.
She's very pleasant.
I'm sure she is. A Thing at Work is the next short story, and this one's good, and it's just about corporate bureaucracy, but I don't have a lot to say about it.
Yep.
I'll be honest.
Yeah, not a lot that isn't covered in other stories. It's exactly what it is. It's yeah, there are a trio of people at the office who are at different levels of power. Would you believe that those who are at lower levels of power do more work and reap more consequences?
Yeah.
Uh, and that basically plays that out.
It
Yeah.
is. Yeah, she steals paper towels. She gets fired. Somebody else steals a lot of money having sex on the job. And because it's like, this client and she's high powered or whatever, they get away with it. Very much the reminder of like, if you compare shoplifting, theft, money to wage theft or something like that,
Yep.
or like just corporate fraud, it's not even remotely comparable, but the way it is prosecuted is different. Once again, this story does have that remarkable amount of context. It's always giving context for why people's actions are the way they are. The manager, his background, the different characters, their background, why they feel the way they do. I highly recommend reading it. It's just the themes. That's kind of the extent of what I have to say. Lenore, you got anything?
No, I mean it's pretty much that, right? You have, again, it's the sort of glossing over of things that are happening around the office, and you just kind of either deny or work around, or or the alternative, of course, is that you have to go through all this like HR nonsense, and like nobody wants to do that, right? But like when the rubber hits the road is where it interests me, right? Because you have Brenda who's stealing at work, right? Just
Mhm.
to make some extra money on the side, right? You have
Classic Brenda.
yeah, you have Jen who is trying to curry favor with her boss. And like it ultimately comes out that Brenda's stealing, right? And there's a bit right at the end where like Jen hashes this all out, because she herself has been exposed to for time theft, right? She's going to a hotel, she's banging this dude, and like there's a brazenness with which the dude comes and lies about what they're doing, right? He says, "Oh, we're actually doing like this big, like, we're cutting this big deal, and like nobody knew about it, right? And if
The hotel
she's
room is just a good place to talk.
yes,
Yeah, to get
yes,
internet access.
and
That was
it's
funny.
And it's that which really like intrigues me, you know, like there is a class of people high enough above up this corporate ladder that is allowed to lie in this way and that is allowed to get away with so much grander a much grander scale of theft than anybody could ever dream of in Brenda's position, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Well, Lenore, you know, there are people who are in grand positions, they're in high positions, they're very important, but there are also mundane, average people, and sometimes they need attention too. And sometimes you write a short story about it called Sparrow,
Sparrow's
about
cute.
very,
Yeah.
very normal girl and a very normal guy who fall in love, and it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
I do like again, you know, Saunders is really good at capturing uh like types of people, right?
Yes.
I'll throw this bits and pieces here. Um she had a way of seeming to dart from place to place. She had a way, too, of saying the most predictable things. When a truck went off the road in front of the little store where she worked, she said, "That's too bad. I hope no one was hurt." When it started to rain, whether drizzling or pouring, she'd say, "It's raining cats and dogs." When someone said the sandwich she was eating looked good, she'd say, "It's a good sandwich." You know, on and it's very like coworker coded, right? You
The
know.
Mhm.
whole thing is it's coworker. Yeah.
I mean, because the narrators are the other people, like us at
Yeah.
the store,
Right.
being like, man, she's like, she kind of looks like a bird.
hmm
Uh,
Got her.
yeah.
It is like the rare case of being the outside looking in, right? Because he's normally doing these characters speaking from a very close perspective and from their own brain and the different
Mhm.
parts. So that is an interesting difference.
hmm
This is the story that fucks up my overarching narrative of what ties all these short stories together.
My
It's not
take,
really about authority and
yeah.
oppression.
My
And
take
he's just
though is that this is just like something he did. Like this reads like writing exercise, and like it came out good enough that someone he submitted it to published it. Also, he's
it's
George
pleasant.
Saunders. You're gonna fucking publish what he sends you, and also especially after the grimness of the first 3 4 stories, it's sort of a nice palate cleanser, and especially because Ghoul, the next one, is just a fucking kick in the whole ass.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I have nothing to say about Sparrow aside from that.
Yeah.
It's nice if you want to read a little pleasant short story, read
Mm.
Sparrow. It's pleasant.
I will say Ghoul is the funniest story in this whole thing.
This is
Cool is very funny.
classic Saunders. We got a fucked up theme park where nobody goes to it.
Yeah, Tom,
However,
give us the sort of explanation of what Ghoul is here.
okay, yeah. So there is a theme park where there are various themed areas where all the decor and it's like it's a small world after all. You get into a little car and you go on and you see a themed thing from the little car. Except unlike it's a small world after all. I don't think that's what it's called. I've never been to Disney, but you know that's where they fucking sing the song.
Yeah.
Unlike that, it's not animatronics. Everything's guys who are acting, and every day they get into position and do their thing. Our hero, I
Under their
believe, is
scenes.
squatting ghoul. uh
Yes.
so he's in like the Halloween area and he's the squatting ghoul. um and they live there full time. When you go on break, you go to an unthemed area that is not for the people, the visitors, we should say. And visitors, of course, capital V. And if you ever mention that you've lived here your entire life and have always been in character every day at your job, and you ever mention that there has never been a visitor, it is a regrettable falsehood and you are kicked to death by everyone.
Fucking regret. And I should also mention it's underground.
Yes, there's the egress spout where the visitors will come through, and it's a big long ladder that goes up and up and up through a tube in the ceiling.
And it just hits up against the cement like top, and there's just a a warehouse up there where they can dump the dead bodies.
Yeah.
It's fucking nuts.
This is sort of like so the most famous fucked up theme park Saunders story is Pastoralia, which is the titular story of his second or third collection. It's great. Read Pastoralia. The thing about that is like Pastoral, in the same way, like the people in the exhibits live there full time and are always in character. If you're ever not in character, you get in trouble. However, unlike Ghoul, where like the visitors haven't been in 50 years. Pastoralia, the park in that story is more like Mr. Yu's speaking wall, which is just like no one goes to it because it sucks. Like we
Yeah.
see the people in it like do the thing. It's like imagine you went to a place and you saw this. You'd say this sucks. I'm never gonna go, and I'm gonna tell other people not to go. And that's yeah. That's a classic. That's a great has a lot of great shit to say about work and work. More pointed than a thing at work, but I think a thing at work is not trying to be. Uh, Ghoul is just that like times the intensity and insanity is just jacked so up. Like it, the people in Pastoralia understand that they had lives before. The people in Ghoul were born there.
Yes. It's literally opens with the line, "At noon, Layla wheels over that of lunch. For a sec, I can be not scary, leaning against our plastiform wall meant to resemble human entrails." Like it's that kind of setting, and that's the world they live in that is very common to them. And at first I was like, oh, these are demons. Nope, not that either. They're just guys who live in this fucked up theme park, and we don't know why they're there, and we will never find out.
Yep.
Somebody put
Uh,
them in there. They send food through chutes basically down it. But like, yeah, they're here, and it's not perfect because sometimes it floods and sometimes the lights flicker, and you're not supposed to acknowledge that either.
that's a regrettable falsehood if you
It's a
do that.
regrettable falsehood.
It doesn't flood.
Yeah,
A
no, it
one
doesn't
time
actually.
one time incidents involving excess water presence.
That's true. I apologize for the regrettable falsehood.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
Jacob, we're sending the squad over to kick you to death now.
Yeah, and if you
uh,
don't kick hard enough, you get the cops will interrogate you about that. Didn't really seem like a very good kick you did before. Why
yeah,
didn't you kick harder?
Mm,
Oh man, I love so okay. At some point the it is clear that the narrator knows the whole story, which is there's never going to be visitors and we're trapped and we don't fucking know anything about this.
yep,
And like the cops when it becomes and like he's in the infirmary and basically the two cops are talking to him and it becomes clear that like they're just accepting like yes you know it all and we know it all too. They sort of like come clean like of course we've known all along. And the line here, like, well, shit, congrats, Bry, she says hoarsely. You've just joined a small fraternity, sworn to secrecy for the good of us all. Don't tell Amy, Kiko says. Do not. The fewer folks who know, the better. I just love that, like, when these cops who have been kicking people to death the entire time and like been scary, when they finally are like exposed, they like start fucking crying. They are so
yeah,
scared. They hate it. They hate the world too. And it's like, I that's probably something that happens in real life. Not that it helps.
yeah.
We
Yeah,
still
not
get
that it
kicked
helps
to
the people
death.
who gets kicked to death, right? Because they report people and they get kicked to death. And it says, quote, "I guess one never realizes how little one wants to be kicked to death until one hears a crowd doing that exact same thing to someone nearby." And it's it's fucking hilarious. And it's also true. It's like, well, somebody's getting kicked to death and it's not going to be me. The specificity too of they're not beating him to death. They're not stone. They're kicking him to death.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
always kicking.
Yeah.
No, it's quite funny. Uh, Lenore, I think this was your favorite, right?
it was, yes, yes. There's a certain. It has my favorite sentence in the entire book, which is here we go. Soon, from the sounds Mr. Frame makes when the crowd finds him over by vending, it becomes clear that the crowd has found Mr. Frame over by vending. It's so brazenly silly, right? It's emblematic, right? Of there's a complete smothering of implication in the setting, right? Everybody's brutally, cheerfully honest, even when they're talking in like this language of obfuscation, right? They're not allowed to say flood, they got to say this other thing, right? But like everybody is just like straight up. Everybody's got this constant like fucking like rictus grin, like maybe not literally, but in their personality, right?
Yeah,
And it's which is not to say that like there's not a very obvious brutality here. Like there's a skip ahead a little bit and let's see. Oh, Tom, I think it's my fault. I should have thrown your letter away, but I treasured it and hoped to read it many more times. But mostly, Tom, it's your fault for ratting me out to Amy after she busted you for doing the wrong thing that you truly did do, after which you tried to claim the immunity that stems from being first individual forthcoming. What was up with that, Tom? Had you succeeded in ratting me out, it would be me, not you, being pecked by a sickly bird near vending, looking much the worse for wear, Tom. And so you've constructed this entire like framework for why you ratted this guy out and got him killed. A. But last sentence in this extract here, to which Tom, long gone, emits a hissing sound from the zone near his mouth. There is a hole that is like leaking air from the ruin of his body.
Fucking hell.
This is so like I people who complain like he's doing another one of these, I just cannot understand their mindset because it's like I can't believe the Beatles are playing Hey Jude, and it's like I can. It's great. What do you? And of course, this is another Liberation Day because we learn at the end that this entire story that we are reading is in fact not a story. Well, it is a story. It's not a story, but is the manifesto that Brian has put together that exposes what this place truly is, and in the context of these events makes it clear why it is in everyone's interest to make this known, because like we get some backstory that at one point people were saying regrettable falsehoods openly, and it caused anarchy, and people didn't go to work. They didn't like if squatting ghoul didn't squat all
Squat
day.
up.
And there was like murders and everything went to shit. And so we decided that we were gonna never say regrettable falsehoods again. But much like in Liberation Day, he has a taste of human companionship for the first time in his life, and it is taken away by the system. And now he knows who his enemies are, which is the system.
And so he says, perhaps in some quiet moment is this world we have made a world in which lovers may thrive. Though I will not live to see it and dread the kicking that must come. May these words play some part in bringing the old world down. And that's like beautiful. And also in the kicking that must come. Like that's funny. It is a
Yes.
good bit. And also it's like he is saying something here. And I appreciate that, right? Because there is a grimness to some of the other stuff where he is saying something very similar. It works quite well. I really enjoy this. I think it's a lot of fun. And I'll also say that I also think that there is something to be said, right? Like it is interesting that they are just perpetuating this system, right? The theme park is a good way of like, we are acting out roles that there is not a lot of sense in us acting out, except we are afraid of what it would be like if we were not living in such a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they can point to times where they didn't live in such a way where it wasn't working so well. But of course, the violence of that anarchy, the word they use, is not is violence, and then the violence of someone being kicked to death, on a pretty regular basis is that's just things churning along. So I think as notably power outages become more frequent and floods become more frequent and the food could stop at any time. And there's definitely something more grim there. But also like
Yeah.
the kicking that must come.
The kicking that must come.
I quite like that.
Do you think there are like right-wing chud like George Saunders fans who read this as a metaphor for cancel culture?
Lenore, don't make me think about that.
Sure hope
Like,
not.
oh man, like these days, like if you say the wrong thing, you get kicked to death.
I mean, like free Palestine, yeah, that's the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's the one.
On TikTok these days, yeah, like you can't say that anymore apparently.
Whew, that's so good. I love the world.
Solid. Yeah, Lenore, you're now making me think of a type of guy I don't want to think about. So appreciate that.
Well, it's like those like tender is the flesh freaks who think that the book is like this anti-vaxxer sort of Bible.
Yes. Oh my God. We're like, Stan Patrick Bateman people.
God. We need to read American Psycho in the near future.
That's gonna be a gnarly one.
Hmm.
Speaking of a psycho, well, she's not she's not Patrick Bateman level, but Mother's Day. This one's just sad.
Yeah. I
there
don't have a
is
ton to say about this
well,
one.
there is a certain psychosis that you kind of like lie yourself into the more you just like stew in your own like, reading, misreading of certain situations.
Yeah, well, she's a boomer mom with artsy lib kids and a little bit of senility, and that all cooked together with years of anger and living in a society that does not let you be who you want to be, which in her case is someone who has a lot of sex and
Hmm.
enjoys herself, uh, ends in, falling down during a hailstorm. That's where that goes. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, like we've been saying all along, like we get these, these two elderly women who have had a rivalry all their lives, and we get both their points of view, and they're both very well drawn characters, and there's lots of things implied, and you sort of get the sense of like a lived life for both of them that
Mhm.
feels real, but I don't know, not much to it. It's just a character study. Look at these two people. This reminds me of, oh God, there's one from Liberate. No, there's one from 10th of December. Don't remember what it's called, but there are just two guys who are like walking along, and there is there's like a river, and someone is having like like in danger in the river. Like maybe the boat, they're in a boat and the boat's capsized. I don't know. Something's happening, and like they both like jump in, and it's unclear if they're all gonna die, if someone's gonna save someone, but it that is a very similar sort of structure where we're switching between two speakers, and I like that one better than this. I don't know. There's not a lot to this one.
Yeah, I mean, you go through life hiding your inner self from people, from your neighbor who like was fucking your husband for a while, because it's easier to just like smooth out your life in that way rather than hash it out, I guess. And sometimes that inner self grabs your outer self and makes you refuse an umbrella that she offers you in a hailstorm, which precipitates
Mm,
a heart attack. I don't know, these things build up, and eventually, like you're liberated from your life one day.
Okay,
I
can I talk about
guess.
Elliot Spencer now?
Please.
Yeah. This is a good one.
Let's fucking go. Today is to be parts of my. Sure, Jer, please do. Point at parts of me while saying the name of it off our list of words worth knowing. Age spot, finger, wrist, and so on. We have in this case, something that definitely shares a lot of DNA with Liberation Day. We have the story of a man who, because of the situation in his life, agreed to be brainwashed and live comfortably. And in this case, they are teaching him basically to be a zombie drone and protest on the side of, we're not exactly sure what, but some bad right wing cause.
Mhm.
They mentioned, this is a cause that led to the death of labor organizers. So something in that sphere of being like pro corporate. And the people doing this are paid by, the faceless corporation. And we are in the head of this guy who is an old ass man. At first you probably think he's a robot for the first half of it. I'm like picturing kind of a robot.
Mhm.
Um, but no, it's just a guy who's like being retaught language and behaving in a way that he is being instructed to. And it is fucking weird. And the language around it is like I just said, and there's spaces in strange places. And when there are, words that end in ly, it puts a space between them. And it is just a lot of fun to read through. I really, really, really like Elliot Spencer.
That's
Um,
that's that stood out to me too. The spacing, especially specifically with the adverbs, like you get the word soft and then the suffix "ly," right? It's Tom, to your point earlier about like certain words being capitalized because they're like corporate in nature, like core concepts that have been like copyrighted or whatever.
Mhm.
Like there's a list of words worth knowing, Jacob, that you just mentioned, right? Which calls to my mind, the word beautiful, right? It's not just like a corporate concept, but like it's something that this person is inculcated with, off of which he can then iterate, right?
Mhm.
And it reads very much as somebody who's been scraped like God knows how many times and is
yes.
just like, like somebody who's just been like mind blasted to the point of like being practically catatonic,
Yep.
you know? And like the softly, right? It's to the point of like breaking down words themselves that like you had to be programmed with certain subroutines to assemble them.
Yeah, like we definitely had a Wordsworth knowing session about Lee.
Yes. you have him saying, giving him definitions of things like bastard, turd, creep, idiot, and that all means individual standing across from us. Which is great.
We should bust out that chant at one of the actions.
Yes, that's good. And Jer, and then Jer, who is the guy he talks to, and he tells him he's gonna be Greg. He says, I am Greg, will be, Jer says, tomorrow. Because tomorrow is, guess what? Job one day. Exciting. Have been waiting long for job one day. Job one, turns out, per Jer is high and noble as all get out. Per Jer, I will stand for freedom, for poor and sick, will defend weak from oppressors. More defining, with help of handy picks. Freedom equals cartoon bird flies above land, smile on beak. Poor equals sad child, pockets sticking out of pants. Sick equals thin guy in bed, X's for eyes. Weak equals guy in desert trying to reach water glass, failing. Oppressor equals tall guy with monster face, sticks stick into body of weak as in 4 handy picks in row. Weak gets more weak with each poke. Why do oppressors wish to poke weak, I say? They're bad, says Jer. Have to be stopped. It's this like simple whatever that he's constructed, and because he is in this mind broken state, he is able to, that is enough, and they're just basically a bunch of zombies get put together to be counter protesters to what it seems to be legitimate protest for one cause or another, and they just yell creep, bastard. They don't know what that fucking means. And when
They say bastard, turd, creep, idiot. They put them all together because they feel
yes,
like it'd be better than saying just one.
and then if they do a good job, they get given root beer.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, no, there's a whole ecosystem of basically like programming laws that these people are set up with. 34 of them to be exact. For more on this, Google Rule 34 mind break.
Thank
Do
you,
that.
Lenore. Appreciate it.
I love how whenever they go out to do their jobs, Elliot Spencer's the guy. That's who he is. That's why it's titled that. Whenever he sees something from a handy pick, he's always just like, "That's wrong." For example, JR and other equal supervisors lead us to trees, but something wrong. Our tree in our handy pick has squirrel. No squirrel at all near these trees. They better fix our handy pick.
Yeah, he's like, can I get the moderators over here?
Yes. Oh God.
Well, and it also speaks to like Jacob, you've mentioned before, like the fundamental untenability of like the pinnacle of fascism, right? There's all these sort of points of articulation at which it can break, right? Like they give, Elliot Spencer a script to follow, right? When this guerrilla journalist comes to interview him and sort of get to the bottom of this like nefarious shit, right? And she's like, "What is your last name, Greg? Do you even know it? The approximate year of the moon landing? The name of the football team from Cleveland? How is it that this house was rented only 3 days ago? Why, when you fellas chant, do you always chant the same 4 words?" And that's a really cool piece of it to me because, like, it helps to demystify this structure, this formation that allows owners of capital to astroturf in this way, right? Because from the correct perspective, it's extremely obvious that this is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that I think about, they're just trying to get a perception thing, right? Like he's like, oh, I'll send him over there so he can get beaten up by the other protesters, right?
Yeah.
He's an old man. And I think about like this situation, whatever's going on here, because we don't actually understand the political situation because we're locked in this guy's head. Um, I think about like the argument that's been made by like some people about like fascism in like the United States is actually, not being the same thing as European fascism, and maybe not even the right word for what we see as like this growing force. I'm not really weighing in on that, just saying because people make the argument, right, that like, oh, well, you need some kind of mass character or something like that, and there's not actually most of it is not really a mass movement of this, that, and the other. I don't really want to get into the weeds of how I feel about that, but the argument being made, it's like the solution in this world is it's like, well, what if every homeless guy, we just retaught him to speak, and then because we promise him root beer on the way back if he does a good job, which is another funny specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
They love
they
it,
just
dude. They can't get enough
they
root beer.
fucking love the root beer, and I think they should. I love root beer too. They're gonna yell. The police are gonna stand in between to keep them apart, and then hopefully nobody's gonna notice. And it's such a goofy little thing, but it is like also like, well, this is just one step beyond, astroturf shit, right?
Yeah.
And we
And
see
like
plenty
the
of that.
the programming where like you tell them about, weak oppressors, uh you, truth and justice, and you just get defined. Like that's all podcast. Like not all
Yeah,
podcast, but like why can't we have a left wing Joe Rogan? Like Joe Rogan's just doing that. Like that's
yeah.
that's it. It works.
Yeah, you say the simple thing and you can believe it or not.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's why when people are like, the Trump people who get disillusioned when he doesn't keep his promises, we have to be ready to accept them with forgiveness. It's like, no, they're never gonna. What? Bastard equals person standing across from you. Like that. There's no observable reality that's gonna crack this.
if you are
Uh,
if you are truly bought into it, of course you have Elliot Spencer in this case, right? Who is somebody
mhm.
who is on this periphery who at the beginning even or like even when he sees the violence, he starts crying. He doesn't get it, right? He's been walking with these people. Maybe he's, if we want to use the analogy of the Trump supporter, he is the guy who's kind of been moving with the flock, but he doesn't get it. He's not bought into it. And of course, you have the solution to that is what? It is to fucking break away from that. You have
Mhm.
to make a clean break with that. And I think that the background, they describe him as what he is. They call him a wino. He has this memory of being, this guy who is an addict. But these memories start to break through of a life that existed before. He's thinking,
God, this is so
Ma,
bleak.
and he's
Yeah.
got little things about like, pie, and there's a woman, um, and there's an Electra, a brand new Electra, and he remembers proposing to someone with a bear, and she says no, and he throws the bear on a grill and sets it on fire, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I just this right here absolutely destroyed me. Um, remembering, right? He's
Mhm.
thinking and it says, "Is that man me now?" Because he's feeling sick, remembering. Would I, man I am now, knock down Ruth, throw bear on grill, get an Electra, drive to Tom's Dizzy Oasis to get further blotto? No. If I could go back in yard, would take bear from fire, pull ring off bear, give ring to Ruth, saying, Ruth, sorry, let us love each other forever. But Ruth married Philip, moved far away. I recall. I now recall. If Ruth not gone, Ma not death, I would say, Ruth, Ma, the me I was then is not the only me I may ever. There is a me under that me who yet wishes to do lovely in this magnificent. Then he says, watch Ruth, watch Ma, this new me, in what time he has left, will try. That fucking got me.
Oh God, yeah.
There is a me that is under me. Is so fucking good. And it is through this experience of being broken and recovering himself and remembering his past in a recontextualized way and just having this impulse. And it's just this sad old man who's re-putting this together and reclaiming some bit of freedom, having his little liberation day and charging off into the night. And I just want to read how this ends here.
Mhm.
He says he's not deaf yet, not dead yet. He remembers how to talk. Not yet, not yet. World lays out before me new with each click of step and swish of aspen leaves above. For that I say thanks, for as long as world is shiny new, there is no death. And what lovely may I not yet do? Here is cactus, word I know from long ago cartoons. Watched with Ma, these west trees, I know like snap, are not my old east trees that I knew by heart, sycamore, dogwood, beech. I do not, as yet, know west trees' names, western trees' names, but will soon, can learn, am learning all the time. No, night, star, moon. No, walk. No, hide. No, path. And little bit smiling, take it. And that's the end of that. And
George
fuck yeah,
Saunders is the goat.
that's so
Oh,
good.
same fucking collection as Love Letter this is in. The Love Letter is useful to remind you that a human wrote this. This didn't come from heaven. You know, we can all we as we stumble, so can we reach the great peaks. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I read that and I was just like, oh my God, there's a me that is under me. There's a path and a little bit smiling, take it.
There's such profundity in that, and not only in the phrasing there, but in like the contours of the phrasing itself, right? He's using these words and he's like recognizing them in the world as opposed to having them told to him, right? He's getting philosophical with this shit. There's a me under the me, as you say, there's he's making like if then statements. He's speculating, and he doesn't start off doing any of that, which like even you know he we are aware that he's destroyed his life, but like even breaking out of that is too late for him, yes, but he breaks out nonetheless, and it nearly brought me to tears.
No,
It's
I
so
cried
good.
when I read this.
And then some guy buys a house.
Yeah, my house is like whatever.
Yeah, no, I kind of wish this had been the last one. I really do wish that they had it's fine. It's a short story collection. It's not, one cohesive. But if I'm ordering them, this would be the one I end on for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Take
Um,
it, yeah.
I think Yeah, and it is so I think it is like emblematic of this whole thing in such a way that like, one, it is kind of squaring off what started in Liberation Day, right? The
Mhm.
mind wipe and the human tool and the all of that, right? There is a legalness to it, right? They're like you have to put the X for your name. That there is a this is all within the system, kind of bit going on. And there is a liberation day that comes through the mind. And unlike the other one, there is a physical escape. Now we can say,
Yeah.
how far is this guy going to get? It doesn't matter, right? The story is over here.
Yeah, the point is that he takes the step.
And I think I don't know. I don't paint or draw, but I really want to draw this like old man walking into the desert. I want that image.
Do it,
I do.
do it, do it,
Yeah.
do it.
I'm gonna try. I'll give it a shot. Um, but
Well, you need to get yourself a dude who has been like mind wiped and trained to create these images. Just take him down off somebody's wall.
this is Lenore's generative AI episode. I'm putting that in the episode description. Lenore defends generative AI.
Yep.
Not doing that. Destroying. Oh my God. Well, do y'all have any thoughts on this last story? I really feel it feels very anticlimactic after that one, but like
Yeah, I don't know. These like the Saunders stories that are like 6, 7 pages long are very hit and miss because there's just I don't know. There's not a lot of space for anything to really get going. I mean that's not true because there are plenty of stories that short that do have a lot of space to get things going. But this is about a guy wants to buy a house. He says his favorite house, not his favorite, it's the house he's always wanted. The guy who lives there now has a ill wife, and they can't afford to stay there and keep it up anymore. And he only wants to sell it to someone who he trusts is like will do it right, who has a good heart. And then the owner is like, it's gonna hurt so much to leave this house behind. Could we come visit maybe and stay a night sometimes? And the guy reacts like anyone would, which is like, and that causes him to not sell the house, not to him or anyone. The house falls into disrepair as they cannot afford to keep it up, and the narrator who wants to buy the house ends up dying first. Um, and he wants to write a letter apologizing. The letter exists in my mind, but I'm too tired to write it. Well, that's not true. I'm not too tired. I'm just not ready. The surge of pride and life and self is still too strong in me, but I will get there. I will write it yet. Only I must not wait too long. I don't, it's you hear me say that. Do you feel anything like when Jacob was reading from Elliot Spencer? No, you don't. You just don't.
It's not the same. Um, I got no other thoughts about that. Lenore, do you?
I don't really have any like strong feelings about this. Like he's trapped in for a guy who sees a lot of charm in a house with a lot of history to it. The irony is that like he's trapped in like spinning his wheels about like, oh, if I could have had this house, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what I got.
My overall, I'll say my overall takeaway from this collection, right, with Saunders is this. I said it before, this deep empathy for even the most detested, like even the most fucking annoying characters, right? And this ability to get inside the head and be like, here is this person, here are their quirks, here's what makes them real. Even in a short thing, even in Love Letter, where I don't love the grandfather and I don't love the story at all, it still has that specificity, the puzzles and the little thises and that's. And I love that feeling of character. I love how it is able to all work. It almost all of it is happening inside systems, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
system is bad. And it is not about, someone aside from, love letters, which again said my piece about that. If the system is bad and people are figuring out how to operate and be liberated from that system, however petty or extreme it might be, right? Whether it be
Mm-hmm.
the kicks or whether it be, something much, lighter or anything in between, or it be someone just kind of existing in our world who is using her powers basically as like the HOA person to get somebody in trouble, and these different levels of tyrannies and these different levels of liberation from it, be they real, be they successful, be they failed, or I think it's like just I don't know. There's a lot of like real beauty in it, and I really recommend people read this. I know, like, no, we don't. I know I say that about a lot of our books, but I really do think people should read this, like, and experience it for themselves because we're not. It's just different. Now, I won't. It's almost. I don't know. I really appreciate you bringing this one to us, Tom.
Hell yeah, I'm really glad you had that
Seconded.
reaction because that's the right one, I will say. So to sort of back up what you were saying, the thing about Saunders is he is very fucking funny.
Yeah,
Like he is a like laugh out loud funny. Like there are many jokes in this book, and that's great. There's a lot of like high concept, interesting sort of speculative fiction type scenarios in this book. But even when the stories are bad, I think that the thing that you cannot forget about Saunders is that just purely in terms of craft, in terms of like writing a sentence, he is like he is so fucking good. He's been doing this for decades. I don't know of a contemporary writer who I think is at his level just in terms of the beauty of his prose. So even on those crappy stories, they're not crappy. Even on the stories that are crappy compared to the other ones, like you are getting something out of it because it is still beautifully written. Um, and I would really recommend any of his short story collections are great. If you want to read short stories written by a very angry man who believes that there's no one good in the entire world and everyone is an evil bastard, you're going to want to read Civil War Land in Bad Decline. There is one point where there is a character who's going across country and he keeps running into scenarios where he meets people who are too evil to comprehend, and there's a family that is also going across country, and the dad is like, oh gee whiz, he's like I'm an all-American dad, and his family are all the most like evil hateful little fucking goblins. And at one point, the apropos of nothing, the son just says, dad, I want to stab you with a huge sword. And I'm just like, oh my. In Persuasion Nation is also good. That one's all about advertising and fucking media persuading you. Pastoralia, of course, is great. It's got C. Oak, one of the best stories. 10th of December, fucking
yeah,
fantastic. The
100%.
titular story is unbelievable. The one at the beginning with the geode, and the kid who has to do all the funny rules that his parent, like, incredible. Just there's so much richness to George Saunders' Lincoln and the Bardo is good too. I thought it was fine. Um, Also, they're short stories. It's easy to read. You don't have just like a couple, like 20, 30 pages, and then you're done. And then you can take a break till next time.
And then you did it. You did your reading.
Yeah.
You did it good. Absolutely. Tom, really, you've said a lot of praise here for Saunders and you've done a great job. Let's tell us about what you do. Tell us about your podcast. I mean, I said I enjoy Anime Sickos quite a bit. I discovered y'all through Worst of All Possible Worlds.
They're great. They're such
mutual
homies.
friend of ours. They're great. You know, like half our audience we have because of our like collaborations with them. They're fantastic. But y'all do great stuff, and I've found y'all through them and through the I think the Chrono Trigger. It was Chrono Trigger episode, I think,
That's
or
correct.
maybe it was the Dragon Ball. Were y'all on the Dragon Ball episode?
No, we were on the Chrono Trigger episode.
No,
Uh,
Chrono Trigger. Yeah.
yeah, we do Anime Sickos, me and Joe. Again, Joe's still in line to vote. I just got a text from him. The line is not moving very fast. So Anime Sickos is a show about the four pillars of modern misery: anime, gaming, posting, and jobs. They're the four things that you can do. There are no other activities in the world.
That's true.
Anime here is a wider definition than most would give it, which is it's not simply animated TV shows from Japan. It's basically all media that is on a screen is anime, as we describe it. And that is useful because we do not like actually talk about anime, I think, like ever. It's certainly not for at least 2 or 3 years we haven't talked about anime, and we certainly aren't going to start because Joe has like a baby son, and so he will never watch a TV series again. Well, for at least like 6 or 7 years. So mostly it's just us complaining about society and yapping and talking. And if you're like, what's good about that? You have to understand that me and Joe are like the two funniest guys who ever lived, and we're funnier together. Us together is more than twice as funny as one of us alone. And it's just a great. Everyone loves us. Everyone who checks us out says we're great. If you do and you don't fucking tell me, because I would like to keep saying that and having it be true.
You will be kicked to death if you say that. Yeah.
That's true. It is a regrettable falsehood.
Yeah, you don't say that.
Genuinely, like y'all do. You say that, like the back and forth between y'all is just it's so often so like dry, but the back and forth is just so funny to me. Just like the little barbs and the little. It's a lot of fun to listen to. It's very pleasant when y'all have guests on. Y'all manage to like also the way you kind of communicate with them. I remember, I think it was the AJ Diddy episode where
AJ
you're talking
rules.
to him about you're talking to him about acting school. I think it is. And I remember
blew my
just
mind.
cracking up. We're talking about rotating lemons in your mind and stuff. It is so simple and dry, but it was so funny. So it's genuinely, if y'all want a laugh, and also, y'all, as you can hear, passionate about media when they talk about it. This
Yeah.
is a podcast that you should check out.
Yeah. We're dumb, but we're also sometimes we're smart, and I think that's the thing. It's we talk about a lot of time, like a dramatic story or show that doesn't have things to laugh at in it is not accurate, because even when everything's miserable, there's funny shit happening. Similarly, the greatest genius, in order to really reach the level of genius, because we are the podcast for geniuses. That's the other thing.
It's true.
In order to reach a level of genius, you also have to be a moron, because otherwise you become top heavy and fall over. And we're fucking dumb as shit. That's why we talk about Dragon Ball and Chrono Trigger. We also do. We've also done a couple of ridiculous audio dramas,
Yes.
which is very funny because that's part of the joke is that they exist at all, because we are a two very lightly edited two dudes yapping podcast. But then every couple of years we'll just do a scripted audio drama that I spend like $3,000 on and like a year and a half on. And they're the things I'm proudest of in my life. If you like George Saunders and the themes and jokes therein, I hope that at least my writing gets a third of the way there. Because I sure tried my best. He is my idol in terms, like, if I had like a genie, I'd be like, make me write like George Saunders, please. And then if that genie did that shit where like your wish is granted, but you didn't do anything. It's like it was within you all along. I would fucking shoot the genie to death. I hate that. No, I want it. I want a fucking shortcut. Anyway,
Your
that's
second
all.
wish is for a gun that kills genies.
The genie. What if the genie? Man, if you were a genie and you got that wish, what a day.
Yeah, gee, that would piss me off. She's just like, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks. It's monkey's paw, and you can only write love letter. That's the
Oh
only one you can
God.
do.
No, that yeah.
It's
Okay.
like watery lib shit. Yeah.
I don't want to have. I renounce genies. Yeah. No. Sorry. I wasn't thinking that through. Anyway.
Barack
Yeah.
Obama is like, love letter 96. How about that?
Jesus Christ. Well, that's all I have to plug. Just
greatly-
Anime Sickos. So listen to that.
Greatly appreciated. We will link everything relevant in the show notes below. Lenore, you have any final thoughts to bring us home here?
Well, hey, if somebody declines to buy you to sell you a house, move on. There's other houses. That's all I got.
mean, there's other houses.
It's true. I see him all the time.
I drove by so many houses. All right, folks. Y'all have a good one. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Socialist Shelf Radio.